Welcome to the Scurry Church of Christ.org. The Bible says in Hosea chapter 4 and verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Please don't let this happen to you. Feel free to contact us at scurrychurchofchrist.org, where you can visit us, and any Bible question that you may have, we will do our best to answer. We are so glad you decided to visit us. We'll turn to the book of Ruth. We're pulling some lessons from the book of Ruth. I want you to turn to chapter 3. Just stay with me, and when it's all over, you'll have a good understanding of the book of Ruth. Many of you probably already do, but you might get a better understanding. Which every time I study, I get a better understanding. So notice chapter 3. So we know Ruth is a Moabite, and she's a faithful woman, and she's obviously a Gentile, but she's a woman that was utilized by God providentially. So as we look at this book, we'll pull out things. I don't want to pull everything tonight. I want to get to what we're going to talk about tonight, and we're going to call this, I want you to think about this, spread your wings over me. That's what she said. Spread your wings over me. Now, I want to get into that. Spread your wings. Look at verse 9, and he said, this Boaz, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering, and some versions say wings, over your maid, for you are a close relative. And so what's happened, look at verse 2. Now is not Boaz our kinsman, whose maids you were. Behold, the winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. He winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down, you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. And she said to her, all that you, notice what Ruth says to Naomi. This is Naomi talking. We're verse 1. That's Naomi talking. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? And so I like Ruth's attitude. She did according to all her mother-in-law had commanded her. It's a Moabite. And so what's happening is that obviously Naomi sold some property, and of course they were look at chapter 4. And now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relatives of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the closest relative, Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here, before the elders of my people. If you redeem it, if you will redeem it, but if not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Well, I don't want to get into, I just want to get to my lesson, what I want to focus on tonight. What's happening here is that, of course, Naomi lost her husband, her children. She has nothing. She says herself, she left with something, she returned empty, she has nothing. So there's this land, is her land, her husband's land. And according to the to the law of Moses, Leviticus, I believe Leviticus 25:25. I want to go there real quick. I want you to go there with me, see what's happening here. Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25:25. They're under the old covenant, and so let me go there. 25:25 says, if a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor, he has to sell part of his property, then his nearest kinsman is to come and buy back what his relatives have sold. And so these are stipulations that God put on these situations when you sell your land. And so when God providentially does this, Ruth is gleaning on Boaz's property, and Naomi recognizes he's a relative. So we have nothing, and so in other words, he can restore us, give us back what we lost. And it's based on the law. And so when Boaz, after Ruth does what she does, Boaz goes to the elders and they discuss the matter. And I'm just going over this, so we'll go over it when we get to that point. And he was not the nearest kinsman. He was not the nearest one. There was someone else. And they discussed the matter. And so they're discussing it, and the guy wants to buy the land. So Boaz makes a point that, okay, if you buy the land, this is something that is ethical, that you have to, I don't know if that's part of the deliberate law or it's just something they should do. It's morally sound. That if you buy the land, you have to also take Ruth as your wife. And obviously that includes Naomi. And so in his mind, that was not a good investment, because what they were doing, when you get the land, that land is to be in your, it's like Naomi now, that land is in her name. And you'll see at the end, when Ruth has a child, it's almost like Naomi's taken on that child, and the child is considered a redeemer, because now her name is, her family bloodline is still in existence. She has something, and so they're excited about that. So I want you to see what's going on here. And so now remember what I said, because we get to that point, we'll go in a little more detail. So let's go back to chapter 3. And so Naomi in verse 1 tells Ruth that this is a near kinsman. In other words, based on the law, then he is the one to give us security. He's the redeemer. He's going to restore us, give us what we have. He is our security. Give us back what we have. And so she tells Naomi, or rather Ruth, what to do, and Ruth does it. So notice what happens in verse 9. She does it, and then verse 8, it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent over, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. But notice what she says. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your coverings." And some say, "Spread your wings over me, over your maid, for you are a close relative." So in other words, you're the redeemer. And so help me, because based on the law, you are in a position to redeem. We lost everything, and even the land. So you are the one. You are the security blanket. It's based on the law. And that's why Boaz tells her, there's somebody before me. It's not me. If he doesn't redeem the land, I'll redeem it. But there's somebody before me. Boaz is very wise, because as I said, when they're discussing it, the guy said, "Oh yeah, I'll take it." Okay, I'm just paraphrasing. You got to take her too, and you got to take the mother-in-law. I don't want it. He didn't say it like that, but in other words, it's not an investment, because I got to provide for them, and the land is not really mine; it's really theirs. And so when there's a daughter or a child, a boy that comes in existence, that land is theirs. So it's not an investment for me, which makes sense. And so that's when Boaz steps in. He said, "I'll be the redeemer. I'll take the land." So when Boaz buys the land, remember that land is in Naomi's name. That's part of the law. It's God's land. You can sell it, but this is how you get it back. Your nearest relative. If your husband died, you have no children, etc. This is how you get the land back. The nearest relatives can buy the land from you, but it's still your land. There's a certain period of time when they can keep it. That's what's happening here. So I want you to notice to spread your wings. Spread your wings. And that's a symbol of protection. Um, it's a symbol of shelter. It's a symbol that shows provide for me, protect me. Okay? Remember, they have nothing and they need a redeemer, someone to redeem what they've lost. I want you to understand they have nothing. So I'm inclined to believe the way it's put, she sold the land, but based on the law, she can get the land back, but they have to find the nearest kinsman. She has nothing. And so when she says, spread your wings over me, she's saying, you are the one who provides the shelter, the security. You are the one you are the protector. Again, Leviticus 25:25, Numbers 27:8-11. See, that's what she's doing. And don't think anything else, because, other people have their stories about what she's not an immoral person. She's a wonderful person. When we get into more of the story, you'll see that it has nothing to do with immorality. So, but notice what she says. I want you to turn to Ezekiel chapter 16. This is something, Ezekiel chapter 16. This is a sign. This is protect me. Spread your wings over me. You are the security. And so give us, remember, you got to understand, there was no, Ezekiel 16, there's no, it's not when, back, there was nothing for the women. The women had to marry for protection. She had to marry for security. She had to marry for the things that she needed. It's not like today. A woman can stand up on her own. She can go get a job. She can provide for herself. She can make it happen. It wasn't like that back in the day. If something happens, she can call the police. It wasn't like that back in the day. So I want you to understand the position that they were in. Boaz was a wealthy man, and God is utilizing him. And I think he knows it. And so he's going to do what she asks him to do. But I want you, this is it's used metaphorically, but it's something. Notice Ezekiel 16. I want you to see the idea of these wings. Then look at verse 1. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, make known to Jerusalem her abominations, and say, Thus says the Lord God to Jerusalem, your origin and your birth are from the land of the Canaanite. Your father was an Amorite, and your mother a Hittite. So he's going back to the history of the Israelites. You were nothing. You had nothing. You were nothing. See, you had nothing. You were nothing. And he says, look at verse 4, as for your birth, on the day you were born, your navel cord was not cut. In other words, nobody wanted you. You're like an orphan. Nor were you washed with water for cleansing. You were not rubbed with salt or even wrapped in clothes. You were filthy. It's like you're like this baby. You just thrown to the side. Nobody wanted you. They didn't even cut the cord. Verse 5, no, I looked with pity on you to any of these things for you, to have compassion on you. Rather, you were thrown out into the open field, for you were abhorred on the day you were born. This is how I found you, Israel. This is how I found you. You needed help. Notice this, when I passed by you, Israel, and saw you squirming in your blood, and that's what he wants them to see. I said to you while you were in your blood, live. Yes, I said to you while you were in your blood, live. I made you numerous like plants of the field. Then you grew up and became tall and reached the age for fine ornaments. Your breasts were formed and your hair had grown. He's likened that to a woman. Yet you were naked and bare. Then I passed by you and saw you, and behold, you were at the time for love. You were at that time, the time for love. So notice this. I spread my skirt over you, same thing, and covered your nakedness. Also swore to you and entered a covenant with you, so that you became mine, declares the Lord. See that? I spread my skirt over you, and that's the idea that I covered you. I gave you, I provided for you. You were nothing. It's like Moab or rather, Ruth and Naomi have nothing. They have no husband. Naomi's sons are dead. The husband is dead. Ruth has her husband is dead. They have nothing. They have nothing. So they need a redeemer. So when she says, spread your skirt over me, or spread your wings over, cover me with your wings, and it depends what version you have, she's saying, you are the security blanket. You are my protection. You are in line to do what needs to be done. And Boaz knows that, and that's why he tells her that there's somebody before me. He knows exactly what she's talking about. It's based on the old law. But I don't want you to see that it's something that's utilized that God, watch this. I want to show you something. Well, I want you to turn to Revelation chapter 12, but I'm going to read these scriptures. You see in turn to Deuteronomy chapter 12. It says in Deuteronomy 32, 10, 11, he found him in the desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness. He circled him. He cared for him as a pupil of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that hovers over its young. He spreads his wings and caught them. He carried them on his pinion. See that? In Exodus 19:4, listen to this. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. See? In other words, I protected you from the Egyptians. You were nothing in Egypt. You were slaves, and you know your struggles. I took you out of Egypt. I gave you security. I fed you. I clothed you. I cleaned you up. I made you went from a slave to perfection, and I did that. But notice what he says, I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Notice that? I brought you to myself. But after I cleaned you up, you see that? Now watch. When you got Moab and Naomi, and she said, spread your wings over me. And when they married, we know they married. A lot of us know the story. Well, now she becomes basically a wealthy woman. You get it? And so now they are dwelling together. They are dwelling together, and that's what she was saying. In Psalm chapter 61 and verse 4, let me take refuge in your shelter, the shelter of your wings. Watch Revelation chapter 4. Revelation chapter 4. Revelation chapter 4. Chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. And I'm going there. Hopefully you're there. I want you to see this. Notice what he does here when he's dealing with the people of God. Look at verse 14. Verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted that's the woman who gave birth to the male child. These are the people of God. Satan is persecuting the people of God. He's utilizing someone else to do that. But notice God's providence. This is God's providence. The picture is God. It's not miraculous. It's God providentially working behind the scene. Just like you got Ruth and Naomi, God is providentially. I'm going to show you that when we get there one day, that God is working behind the scene. It's providence. The book of Ruth is full of providence. You see? Now watch. And he says, verse 14, but the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman, that's the people of God, so that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. And the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, that's the people of God, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened, see that? Earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth. And so that's God providentially working behind the scene. See? But notice what he's doing here. Notice he mentions verse 14, but the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness. Now that wilderness, that's where he provided for her. That's for us. So that's for us. God is our security blanket. God is providing. He's the one. And it's very interesting when you look up that in time, times, and half of times. Well, it ties in with chapter 12, verse 6, and that's 1200. That's 1,260. Chapter 13 and verse 5. That's 42 months. And so with that, that's 3.5. I'm not going, but I want you, that's 3.5. So watch this. He's dealing with Satan, and that entails 3.5. 3.5 is half of 7. It's imperfect. 7 is perfection, complete totality. And so, in other words, when he's in it's like Satan. What he's doing is not complete. He doesn't have complete power. It's very interesting. I put that I have control. See, I am the 7. 7 is perfect, complete totality. 3.5 is opposite, and it's like the power of the beast is equivalent. It's like Satan does not have great strength. I am in control here. His power is not complete. I like that. That's why it says time, times, and habits. I know I said that fast because I don't want to go into it, but if we get into the study, it's very interesting. But I want you to see that God, notice this, Satan is doing this, and who's behind the scene? God is providing behind. He's doing this providentially. That's what happened in the book of Ruth. You know what's very interesting about this? You notice that, turn to 2 Corinthians. I want to look at 1 Peter first. 1 Peter chapter 1. I want you to go there, verse 4. You notice that I was thinking about this. There's the beginning of the tribulation, and then there's the end, and there's the middle. So at Ruth, there's a beginning of their tribulations. The husband died, her husband dies, Naomi's sons, and now they're dead, and that's the beginning of it. The middle is they go back home, it was Bethlehem, and you see their faithfulness in the middle. Their struggles, their faith is tested in the middle. And then at the end, you see how God provided for them. Job's faith, it's like Job's tribulation. There's a beginning of it when he lost everything. Before we get to the end, in the middle, his faith is tested. And so the ending, it's all based on what happens in the middle. So when Job's faith was tested in the middle, because there's a beginning, and see, we put a time frame in the middle. That's when there's a middle, that's when you trust in God. In Romans 8:28, God is in control. Everything's based on, he loves us so much, it's based on his will. And so it's like it's in the middle that we have to focus on. You ever do something, and I've done it before, like when the end comes, I thought I didn't handle that well. I said that based on what happened in the middle. Or when the end came, I thought I did that well according to God's word. It was based on what happens in the middle. That's what we have to understand. There's a beginning and there's an ending. And so what we do in the middle, you weren't supposed to hear that. I'm timing myself. What we do in the middle, I got to do this better. So I want you to see that. Now look at 1 Peter chapter 1. Jeremiah told me I need to order something on Amazon. Anyway, let's go. Let me stop. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 4. Watch this. He said, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. That's the end. That's the end. That's the end. Who are protected by the power of God. This is in the middle, through faith, for the salvation ready to reveal in the last day. So God is doing what he needs to do in the middle so he can make it to the end. In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, that's the middle. That's the middle. If necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, that's the middle. That's the middle. See? So that the proof, notice this, but notice what happens in the middle. Notice what happens in the middle. Now, I want you to look, I'm going to read this, but notice what happens in the middle. Ruth, it was a beginning to their tribulation. The middle was a proof of her faith. See, look at verse 7. So that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, that's in the middle. That's in the middle. May be found, notice the end, may be found to result in praise and glory and the honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. That's the end. And though you have not seen him, you love him. Watch this. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Your faith is tested in the middle. How much you love him is tested in the middle. You ever see people, we go through that, we're so faithful, everything is going well, but here comes temptation. That's going to test. I love you, Lord. I love the Lord. I will follow his commandments no matter what. Well, then here comes temptation. Your test is in the middle. And then comes the end. And so if you didn't really do well in the end, what God is going to do, he's going to bring you back to the middle. That's what happens. That's how the book of Hebrews, they thought they had it going on. They thought they were able to do this and that. At one time they were faithful, and God lets them know. And they were one time they were suffering with the saints, and then God disciplined them again. He opened the door. He brought them back to the middle, so their faith can be improved like how it should be. And they realized they weren't strong as they thought they were. It's in the middle. And he said, look at verse 8, and though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not see him now, but believeth in him, you greatly rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, obtaining as the outcome. Notice this. Watch this. Notice the end. Notice the end. Obtaining of the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. That's the end. See? That's how it works. I noticed that. And so Ruth did what she had to do in the middle. Well, in the beginning, you see her faith. She makes statements to Naomi, and you see what she's doing. She's providing for her mother. It's just them. She's playing a role like the husband she wrote. She's providing. She's doing this, and God is blessing her behind the scenes. In the middle, she's still faithful. She doesn't know the outcome. She doesn't know the outcome. She did not know. It's interesting about providence. It's like you don't know. She didn't know God was utilizing. And we'll get to that. How does she, when she goes into the field to gather the food, the gleaning, whatever, and Boaz comes, it's perfect timing. Here he comes, and she's in a perfect field. Well, who was this woman? She doesn't know that she's going to be the one to bring Christ into the world. She's just being faithful. And her faith was tested in the middle. And at the end, she is blessed tremendously. At the end, Naomi is blessed tremendously. Naomi didn't know. She's telling me, don't call me Naomi. I mean, you see her attitude. She didn't know. It's what happens in the middle. But the problem is with a lot of times, and I've realized this about life, we put too much time. We try, when things don't turn out the way we think they should, we lose our faith in God and we lose our trust in God. We have to bounce back and go back to God and say, well, I'm letting God handle it because there's an ending. He knows what he's doing. He's got to get us in order in the middle so we can get to the end. He knows exactly how to do it. That's where our faith, our trust comes in. Trust him and back off. It's not about time. It's how he wants it to be. If we can help you, please come out and stand and sing a song for the invitation.